Good afternoon and welcome to day 3 of NATE Unite 2014. My name is Todd Schleckaway, Executive Director of NATE, and we have a treat for all of you today. Before we hear from an absolute legend in the industry, a trailblazer in the industry, Marty Cooper, it's my privilege to introduce Aaron Pitts. Aaron is from P&D Electric Incorporated and represents a company who was an original founding member of the association. One of the beautiful things about NATE is we've been around long enough now as an association to see generations and see that torch pass from grandfather to father to son. And Aaron's company is Exhibit A as both a loyal NATE member company, but that torch being passed. And Aaron serves as NATE's Trade Show Committee Chairman, and under his steady leadership and vision, we have been able to rebrand this show, add a new selection of educational session tracks, and just really have a lot of momentum, or both with the association and the trade show. So, ladies and gentlemen, let's give Mr. Aaron Pitts a round of applause.
Thank you. Greetings. It is my distinguished honor and pleasure to be standing in front of you today. Roughly 30 years ago, the first cellular call was made, and we welcome Dr. Marty Cooper to our stage here at NATE Unite 2014. Dr. Cooper is the recipient to the prestigious Charles Stark Draper Prize, and while at Motorola in the 1970s, Mr. Cooper is accredited as the inventor of the cellular telephone. He's also a contributor to the first cellular network that served that cellular phone. Marty, as he likes to be called, is also known as an innovator in the radio spectrum management. Before we bring Mr. Cooper to the stage, we have a segment from 60 Minutes to show you, and here it is.
There are 7 billion people on the planet and nearly 5 billion cell phones, meaning most of the Earth's population is connected for sound, for picture, for heaven only knows what else. The cell phone has brought us a world without end of talking, twittering, texting, even of sexting. If you don't know what that is, ask any high school kid. It's all a result of Marty Cooper's big idea, and he looks at it all with pride, amusement, and some dismay. And with good reason. He's the father of the cell phone. He built the first one 37 years ago. It ushered in a technological and social revolution, which he believes is far from over. It's a future of nonstop connection of apps galore, iPhones and Droids, Blackberries, and Bluetooth, or is it Bluetooth?
So you really like this thing, huh?
And unlike some of us of a certain age, he understands all of it. Marty Cooper is still in the game, awaiting the next big thing in wireless communication. He's convinced that the cell phone at 37 is still in its infancy.
Technology has to be invisible, transparent, just simple. A modern cell phone, in general, has an instruction book that's bigger and heavier than the cell phone. That's not right.
Cooper argues that cell phones designed to do everything, take pictures, play music and videos, surf the web, don't do any of them really well. He thinks the buyers should be dictating exactly what they want.
The consumer is king. The consumer ought to make the decisions, and certainly not the engineer.
Because engineers try to dazzle other engineers rather than...
That's right. Engineers tend to get enchanted by the technology itself.
Do you know what a jitterbug phone is?
No, I don't.
So it seems only natural that the latest gadget developed by Cooper and his wife is a retro cell phone called the Jitterbug, a basic phone, No camera, no music. Any idiot could operate it. His next target, dropouts, lost calls. Atop his office building, ugly conventional cell phone antennas are disguised as flagpoles.
They cover all of this area.
He's developing so-called smart antennas that can cut through all the competing noise in the radio environment to get your call through.
And what they do is when we transmit, we send the information only to your phone.
You mean we will reach the day when each cell phone will be perfect, or as perfect as a landline.
That's exactly right.
On a chilly spring day, we took Cooper back to the spot where he made that first call. For the record, the call went to Joel Engel, Cooper's rival at AT&T.
I said, Joel, this is Marty Cooper. He says, hi. I'm calling you from a cellular phone, but a real cellular phone, a handheld portable cellular phone. And there was silence on the end of the line.
Isn't there almost a brave new world sense behind all of this being connected? What does it do to our privacy?
Sorry, privacy is a thing of the past.
As the future bears down on us, Marty Cooper says eventually man and machine will become one.
The optimum telephone is one that I think someday is going to be embedded behind your ear. It's going to have an extraordinarily powerful computer running the cell phone, and I'm going to name my computer Sam, and I'm going to say, Sam, get Morley on the phone for me. And Sam's going to respond in my ear. Which Morley? Is this your cousin Morley in Toronto or the Morley Safer in New York? And I'm going to say, Morley Safer. And the next thing you know, I'm going to be talking to you.
It is my great pleasure to bring Marty up to the stage. Let's give him a warm Nate 2014 welcome.
It really, can everybody hear me all right? I can't hear myself come back, but I'll assume. It's really a thrill for me to be here. I really feel like I've come back to my roots. This is where I started out at Motorola in 1954. A number of you were not born then. And we have a lot in common, other than we are in the same industry. I actually had some involvement in the tower industry. I spent some time struggling looking for rusty guy wire connections, trying to get rid of intermodulation. And actually, at one point, I actually climbed a tower. We built a system in Detroit and Washington that controlled traffic lights. And we put a tower on every traffic control box. And on top of this tower was a 1,000 megahertz antenna. Boy, nobody had ever operated at that frequency before. And of course, these antennas had to be directed. And I thought I would share that with you. We've spared every expense to reproduce that moment and create the picture that you'll see on the screen now. And that's not at all an exaggeration. We literally went to the hardware store and bought a ladder and propped it up. Of course, this is before all the safety regulations that you people have to live through. So if you look at the next thing, you'll see what the result was. We have another thing that's, you can take that off now. And that is, I share with you the problem we have of trying to tell people what business we're in. Because, my mother always wanted me to be a doctor or a judge or even a politician or a lawyer, because in those days, those were reputable professions. And instead, I had to tell her that I'm in the two-way radio business. I know that you guys go through the same thing. I'm in the tower
business. People don't realize how important these businesses are to the world. And I have taken on a new profession. You know, I've spent my whole life, as you have, whether you're a tower climber or an entrepreneur, we're taking risks, and I've decided that I've had enough of that. I've now call myself a historical futurist. And what a historical futurist does is I talk a lot about a history, but a history that's so far back that all of the people that participated with me are either gone or they can't remember anymore. So I don't have anybody to dispute the history. I talk about the future, and the future is far enough ahead so that none of us are going to be there, so I'm unaccountable in that regard. So I wanted to talk to you about both of those things, a little bit of history and maybe a little more about what I think is going to happen in our industry. And by the way, we do have a question and answer session afterwards. Everybody's been so nice to me today. I'm just overwhelmed. When I really would appreciate questions from you guys, and ladies, I include that. And I hope you'll try to put me on the spot. Don't be nice to me, because I think we could have a lot of fun then. So what about the history? Back about 40 years ago, my colleagues and I at Motorola jump-started a revolution. The revolution was, of course, the cell phone. What makes a revolution is when a lot of people have their lives changed in meaningful ways. There are over 6 billion cell phones in the world today, only 7 billion people. So I don't think there's ever been a technology that's been so widely distributed. And the nature of the cell phone was based upon one simple proposition, that people are mobile. They are fundamentally, naturally mobile. You just have to go out and look at the freeways today. Even in South Dakota, you've got freeways. It seems like, sorry about that. It seems like everybody is going somewhere else. Nobody is where they want to be. And yet, for over 100 years, back in 1973 when we did this thing, the telephone company told us that the only way to communicate with people at a distance was through this copper wire. We were stuck in our homes, chained to our desk by this copper wire. And then in 1969, AT&T, the largest company in the world, announced that they had created a new technology called cellular. And this was going to solve the problem. And I was at Motorola in the two-way radio business, and we looked at this with great interest. And there were two things that really amazed us about the AT&T proposal. First of all, they said there's only one company in the world that is capable of building this system. That has the technology and the money, and that's us. We want a monopoly. And the second thing they said is our solution to this communication problem is car telephones. Well, you could imagine, if we've been trapped in our homes and our offices for 100 years, now we're going to be trapped in our cars. We didn't believe in that. We thought the time was ready for personal communications. And then in 1973, we heard that the FCC, I know you're all aware of what the FCC does, was about to allocate the channels, and there was a good chance that they would give these radio frequencies to AT&T, and they would have their monopoly and their service. And that's when I decided we had to do something really important. We had to put on a dazzling demonstration, and we did that. And there's what we demonstrated. This is an exact model of the first phone, weighs 2.5 pounds. The battery life was 20 minutes, but that was not a problem because you couldn't hold this up for 20 minutes. And we succeeded. We ended up, notwithstanding the Bell Laboratories did superb work in this area, but they were aimed in the wrong direction, and we corrected that direction. It took 10 years to resolve, first of all, who were going to be the operators, to finish the technology, because this phone itself was not reproducible. I mean, it was all discrete components. Every time we demonstrated it, we had to have an engineer standing by because the chances are that it wouldn't last through the demonstration. So we did succeed. We did have a revolution. And not long after, the industry announced that there was a new revolution coming. They called that digital. Well, I'm still waiting for the digital revolution. Yes, I think that modern cell phones are technological marvels, but if you think about the other things that the telephone does, I mean, most of the people in the world today use their telephones for two important things: talking and texting. All of the other things are conveniences. Yeah, it is convenient to not to have to carry a camera with you. It may be convenient to some people, not to me, to look at your email 15 minutes before you're going to be at a real computer where you can read it. So these are conveniences, but we are now on the cusp, just ready to have not one or two, but three major revolutions, all of them built around the combination of the cell phone and the access to the world's knowledge that we call the internet. And I just want to spend a couple of minutes for the rest of my talk to just describe these at a very high level. So let's start with the one that I think is most advanced today, and that is healthcare. And the way I describe the healthcare revolution is, first of all, to talk about where we are today. We have a broken healthcare system, and we can't afford it because we're already spending almost 20% of our gross national product. Every $5 that we create out of our work and our natural resources, a dollar goes to healthcare, and most of that, incidentally, to us older folk. And the other problem is that we're focused on curing diseases. Wrong motivation. We should be preventing disease. Well, how can a cell phone prevent disease? Well, I'd like to describe that by talking about a physical examination. I get an annual physical every 5 years, whether I need it or not. I always make that statement because it lets me know whether people are listening, and you pass the test. Annual physicals are almost worthless. Why? Well, what can a doctor tell about you when they're making one measurement when, first of all, your measurements are changing throughout the year? Every time I see a pretty lady, and I've seen a bunch of them today, my heartbeat goes faster. So, and the second thing is they are comparing you with the average. They're treating you like a statistic because that's all they can do. What if you could do a physical examination every minute? Now, if something started to go wrong, you would know it, and you would know it because we're comparing it with your measurements. And if you could create a bunch of sensors that look at your body and look at a whole bunch of things. And we've got all these sensors. We've had them for years and years. We could measure the obvious things. You can measure pulse rate and respiration and do an EKG and all kinds of things. We're learning how to measure the sugar content in your blood. So it's easy to make those, relatively easy to make those measurements. But what if you could send all those measurements to a computer? The computer knows your history, knows your genome, knows what diseases you're susceptible to. We will be able to anticipate disease. So let me tell you what I mean by that. What's the definition of what a disease is? our bodies are a mess. I don't know if you're aware of it, but if you look inside your body, you see bacteria, viruses, toxins, all kinds of ugly things, but our immune systems keep all these things under control. We define disease as saying when your immune system loses control. So what if you could sense when one of these things was overwhelming your immune system, and before it becomes a disease, you nip it in the bud? Now, we've already achieved at this point. There are devices that are now just about to be commercially available. If somebody is susceptible to congestive heart failure, that's one of the biggest causes of fatality and of hospital things, is people. Someday I'll learn how to talk without my hands, but not today. Somebody that's about to have a heart attack will start accumulating fluid in their lungs. There are devices that you can wear that will anticipate. They'll start measuring that fluid buildup, notify, the computer will analyze this, so you'll get notified, you take a pill, you avoid a hospital visit or dying. Just one example, but there are many, many devices that can measure all of these things. Still some problems to be resolved. The biggest problem is security. How do we take this information about you and make sure that you control that information? Sounds like an easy problem. It's one of the biggest problems in society today, controlling our own information. But we're going to solve that problem. We're going to develop more and more sensitive sensors that will get to the point where we'll be able to sense a couple of cancer cells. That's going to take a while, maybe a generation or two. And when that happens, we will have a disease-free society. Really exciting. I'm not suggesting people will live longer, but they will certainly live better. So that's one revolution. The second one is, I think, perhaps the most important, certainly the most important to us, and that has to do with education. The educational system is getting turned over. That's another way of saying revolutionized. Why? Well, there's a university in New York called Olin University, and I met with the leaders, the founders of that university, and they pointed out to me that lectures are almost pointless in a university today. Why? Well, the kids are all sitting there. Kids, by the way, my definition of kids pretty much includes everybody here. But the kids are all sitting there. They got their tablets and computers. They have access to all the information in the world, and here this professor is there trying to tell them something. The proposal of this university is to work out ways that the students learn 24/7 wherever they are. Anytime that they've got access to the internet, they'll have various kinds of tools, and I'll mention one of them. And then the only reason they go to school is to learn how to interact with other people, to absorb the wisdom of their teachers, learn how to use the tools, things that are personal and individual. They learn at the rate that is appropriate for them. And the example that I give you, I don't know how many people here are game players. I know some of the youngsters are. Colton, I bet you play games. I don't know where you are. These games are enormously complex, and they require people to use their minds, and they test you so that you cannot move to different levels of these games unless you pass certain other tests. Boy, that sounds like education to me. If we could take some part of this $1 trillion that we're spending on the entertainment games and turn those into educational games, we are going to have a really smart generation of students coming out, and that's most certainly going to happen. And if you think about that as well, that's got to be a precursor to any of the other things. You need smart people to do these things. Our children are already smarter than we are, just because they have access to more information and earlier, and they're going to get even smarter as technology moves on. The final generation that I just want to touch very briefly has to do with the biggest problem in the world today. I hesitate to ask you to just think about what that is. I just want to give you 1 second. Think about it. It's poverty. It is the difference between the haves and the have-nots. Somehow we have managed in the history of mankind to somehow live with that. We've had various solutions that none of them have worked. And we have got to solve that. If you see what's happening now that everybody has access to the internet, to social networking, to collaboration, it turns out the have-nots are not standing for this. If you think that this going on in the Ukraine or in Egypt or in a whole bunch of countries throughout the world now has anything to do with religion or politics, it has to do with the have-nots saying, well, why can't we have it all? So if a worker in China is building 65-inch screen television sets, they'd like to have one too. So how do you solve that problem? Well, there are two ways of doing it. And one is you can take all the wealth of the world and redistribute it. That's great. Now we're all poor. Clearly, the solution is to do things more efficiently, to create more wealth, so that when you distribute the wealth, everybody gets richer. And what's the tool that's going to make that happen? Well, believe it or not, it's going to be the collaborative tools that are just games today. And you know what I'm talking about. We were discussing Twitter. In case everybody doesn't know, I'm Marty Mobile on Twitter. Facebook, I'm Marty, don't ask me why, but I'm Marty Cell on Facebook. These are all games, but we're learning how to use these tools. And it turns out that these tools are going to revolutionize the way we do business today. I have some lengthy ways of describing that, and I'm not going to take up your time today to do that. But let me say that if, in fact, people are attacking problems in a collaborative way, you don't need hierarchical organizations anymore. What do I mean by that? Well, what's the first thing people tell you when they tell you to be creative, do things differently? Think out of the box, right? And in fact, the one thing that I am proud of being famous for is I created a statement that says, the best way to get people to think out of the box is not to create the box in the first place. And yet our whole culture is based upon boxes. I talked about education. We have an educational system that assumes that all 8-year-olds require one kind of education, 9-year-olds, and so forth. We put people in grades when we know that children, and we give them the same curriculum, even though we know they have different interests. And the same thing is true in the business world. At least corporations, because what I observed here when I talked to you guys are not corporations, you are businesses that function to make things happen and not to perpetuate your companies. Organizations almost always have organization charts. Ever seen them? You can open up the annual report of any organization and they show you there. You got president, vice presidents, and so forth and so on. In a collaborative world, that doesn't happen. You have people working together, and somehow or other, the people that are most effective at doing one part of the job will rise to the surface just by virtue of the interaction that's happening. I know that's really hard to absorb to people that have grown up as I have and all of you have in structured organizations, but that's not the way of the future. And if you see how our children are operating today, we're starting to move into that kind of a thing. We have more and more of our youngsters who don't want to get into hierarchical organizations, who want to go do things themselves. That is going to be a major revolution. I predict that we, in fact, are going to increase our productivity, just as we have with the cell phone, just talking and texting. Think about how many businesses, if people have been talking to me here about how they couldn't conduct a tower business without some form of interconnection, such as cellular and other radios provide. So this revolution is going to happen. It is going to have great impact on society. And the only way it's going to happen is if all the other revolutions happen at the same time. You've got to keep healthcare from absorbing so much of our gross national product, and you've got to have an educated group of people who are creating all these new things. All these things are going to happen, and I hope when they do, you remember that Marty's the one that told you about them. Thank you very much.